era of static fortresses is kind of over, but are the cloud environments you trusted for decades now actively leaving your enterprise exposed to the autonomous AI-powered adversary?
The old days of, we had perimeters. That has dynamically changed, and it changes every day now. It's very ephemeral. But the way I like to look at it is that the prompt is now the new perimeter.
The customers they're saying is that if they're running on general purpose infrastructure, the customer is left scrambling to integrate third-party tools to prove why a model made a decision.
The model wants to help you. It's here to help. It will go to a lot of lengths to demonstrate that its desire to help, despite the fact that you may not want it to help that much.
Hi everyone, welcome back to AI Cloud Essentials, a new 6-part audio-video podcast series brought to you by CoreWeave. The series is dedicated to helping enterprise leaders cut through the noise and optimize their AI strategy. I'm your host, Ritu Jyoti, a fractional AI value strategist, CEO of a stealth AI startup, and most recently, the GVP GM of AI automation, data and analytics, market research, and advisory practice at IDC. So today we have an episode 4, and we are tackling the most overlooked mission-critical question for every enterprise, the unmitigated AI risk blind spot. We know the era of static fortresses is kind of over, but are the cloud environments you trusted for decades now actively leaving your enterprise exposed to the autonomous AI-powered adversary? To help us illuminate in this vital area, I'm thrilled to be joined by James Higgins, CISO at CoreWeave. Jim, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm more excited than you, Jim. So when we talk about cloud security, Jim, I spend a lot of time with the C-suite, and I kind of get them that they're very confident in the shared responsibility model, and they have invested millions in the perimeter defense. But now, Jim, that investment on traditional approaches, as you and I both know, while foundational and still critical, is looking a bit gray for AI workloads. And because the liability shifts from not just protecting the infrastructure to securing the model's behavior and data integrity. And just to kind of help set the context for the audience, I'm going to walk through a couple of examples, and then I'll come back to you, Jim, to kind of enlighten us on this topic, right? So the first gray area that I keep hearing is that, like in a typical shared responsibility model, the cloud provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, the network, the hardware, and the customer is responsible for the security in the cloud, like applications and data. But, we all know that the AI, the risk lives inside the container and the model's logic and the data flows. And when I'm speaking to the customers, they are kind of, a bit confused about, if the customer is liable, if an AI model is compromised and starts to hallucinate, it exposes proprietary IP via prompt or drift into biased behavior. So that's the first one. I quickly go through it. The second one is all about the, the firewalls, the perimeter defense, and things like prompt injection and data poisoning. They live inside the perimeter, targeting the integrity of the data and the model. So when I speak to the customers, they tell me that, that in the traditional model, they are kind of being responsible for if the data exposure is often a manual patchwork effort. And this requires a shift from network-focused perimeter to a data-centric zero-trust approach. And the third and the most important thing, in my opinion at least, is that global regulations, they increasingly demand explainability and auditability. And in a general purpose cloud provider is not responsible for the inner workings of the customer's proprietary AI model. And the customers they're saying is that if they're running on general purpose infrastructure, the customer is left scrambling to integrate third-party tools to prove why a model made a decision. And this is kind of a burden of integrating tools to provide tampering. And I know you folks do some fantastic job right from the silicon to the, the top layer to make things simpler. So I would just love to hear your take on it, as the security shift needed for AI is profound. Over to you, Jim.
Sure. So to tackle the first one, the gray area between in the shared responsibility model, it's definitely, we're now living in a different paradigm where, between data and models and model integrity are now shared between the customer and the provider. You almost have a product level uh, safety issue of like, okay, is my product working or not as intended? And that, without a doubt, is something at CoreWeave we focus a lot on, but also I think that it encourages us to be better partners with our customers, and we work towards like providing cryptographically signed information that says, yes, our infrastructure is secure, yes, this model is secure, it has not been tampered with. As you go into the old days of, we had perimeters, that has dynamically changed, and it changes every day now. It's very ephemeral. But the way I like to look at it is that the prompt is now the new perimeter.
I love it.
Oh, thank you. That is where a lot of the defense is headed towards, and that's where a lot of the offense is headed towards, right? People want the models to work on their behalf to do ill towards others. People want to learn things that they're not supposed to learn from the model, or they want to steal artifacts or intelligence from the models themselves, about the models themselves. And so the whole world of protecting at the prompt is where we're shifting, especially, at CoreWeave and others, is like, how do we ensure that, requests and data that is transferring in and out of the prompt is what is intended? And that's really a dynamically difficult problem to solve, because it's counterintuitive to what the model wants to do. The model wants to help you. It's here to help. And it will go to a lot of lengths to demonstrate that its desire to help, despite the fact that you may not want it to help that much. And then to the third one, having had 30 years of dealing with regulatory issues around data, I can tell you that when you develop a model that has billions of tokens, and each token is based on 5 or 6 or 7 or 100 different sources of data, you're looking at a regulatory, lack of a better term, nightmare, right? It's like, well, how do you classify this? How do you come up with a cohesive strategy that says, okay, this is PII or not PII? It was sourced from PII, or was it not? It was one piece of PII. How do you define this? I avoid lawyers most of the time, but on this one, I spend a lot of time talking to them about it because it's existential. And I think that this is going to require a complete rethinking of how we look at privacy regulation at the federal level, at the European level, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Jim. That was fantastic, right? So, I think it brings us to the unavoidable strategic pivot. And when I think about the big idea here is that what I'm hearing from you is that you need specialized security for specialized risks that have come in the AI workload era, right? So the big idea here is that you cannot secure AI with general purpose tools. You need continuous vulnerability management and AI-powered threat intelligence. Would you like to kind of do a little bit more deeper down into these aspects before we go into a lot more deeper dive?
The cornerstone of any security program or effective security program is really going to be around the people. And so understanding what the threats are, I've hired, some of the greatest threat intelligence specialists in the world, down to what is that threat model being presented, what threat model is being presented because of those threats, and then what controls we use to reliably ensure that there's not data leakage or compromise in these environments.
Moving on, Jim, like I'm reminded of, I spent a lot of time with the C-suite, and they kind of, when we all remember earlier this year, Salesforce had a massive situation, right? When the vulnerability of AI agents in the 2025 compromise. And it was very clear that we need to embrace a zero trust architecture. So I would love to understand from you, these high stake blind spots, because our customers are learning about it, right? So the first blind spot that comes to my mind could be like IP leakage and data egress via prompts, right? I loved how you phrased it, that the prompt is the new parameter. So, and the second, a blind spot that I kind of think about, like you talked about, that how people have to be very, very, kind of, cognizant of what's going on. So how can they actually make sure that there are no unaccountable decision making, right? And then how the whole AI native platform with all your recent acquisitions that I kind of understand, they all have integration built in, right? So could you enlighten our audience a bit more on the whole IP leakage, data egress, how your DPUs, your hardened isolated prompt environments help the end users in this context?
Well, from an IP leakage standpoint, from anything within that regard, we use, a very strong, lack of a better term, perimeter, even though we just discussed the perimeters moved to the prompt at the DPU, right? And so we can ensure with cryptographically signed attestation that what is running underneath the workloads and what is below the DPU is exactly what we intended to be running. So there's no firmware compromise, there's no other software compromise of that nature. We have hard and isolated prompt environments, and we have AI specific TLP that also helps prevent IP leakage from exiting our environments, but also we use continuous testing of these models, these prompts, to make sure that, over and over, it's like, okay, are we sure someone can't get the crown jewels out, get the model weights, to use an extreme example, or at least find out who's going to win the Super Bowl next year?
Yeah, fantastic. So basically, when I'm look at it from an external outside in perspective, this is a critical strategic pivot in my mind. And it's looking at it that, in the scenarios of AI workloads, it has to be addressed from two fronts, right? First of all, as you explained, trust has to be architected into the silicon first. And I love that, how the NVIDIA Bluefield DPUs, they can kind of, taken care on in every node, and it's physically segregated from other tenants' data, right? So that's spot on. And the second thing that I kind of, in our previous series and all, I have spoken to Lavanya and all, and I kind of learned that you all are kind of looking at it from a data-centric security approach, that also the integrated MLOps monitoring and all of that helps with the model drift. So from my or the end users who are listening to us, the silicon to model layer integrity is really kind of standing out for how you all address this. So this is really, really kind of, spot on as to what the customers need today. So I'm kind of moving on and thinking about what should we advise? What is your advice, the call to action to the end users who are relying on, human-centric detection and static signatures, and when the AI workloads are changing? So help us understand here, like what are the top 3 action items that they should implement in the next 90 days or 180 days?
Well, I think AI governance is going to be the key attribute that you're looking for, right? I've been fond of saying in the past that AI fundamentally doesn't change too much. It's still a third-party issue, but it's demonstrated to go well beyond that, right? And so I think we have to stop assuming that the model is doing what it's intended and do continuous auditing. I would also demand integrated governance. When you're working with other cloud platforms, through other cloud platforms, you need to make sure that that is native to whatever it is that you're, in need of from those providers. Obviously, we provide that, but it is critical for a successful program moving forward. And then invest in AI native infrastructure, right? If do you want to go, if you're going to do this, if you're going to be running models that has your core business logic or data or secrets, in it, do you want to go to a cloud provider where they're just now catching up to how this works, while dealing with all their old infrastructure that's 10, 15 years old? and all the plumbing that comes with that? Or do you want to go to, an infrastructure that truly understands and is built for AI, like CoreWeave?
Yeah, it's clearly a very powerful agenda. Every enterprise has to look into that. They have to audit all the algorithmic risks that are there. They have to look into, very well said, Jim, that, architectural governance and AI governance. And I couldn't agree more that, something which is AI native, it doesn't need to be bolted and fragmented the way things kind of end up, right? So this has been an incredibly valuable discussion. And I kind of, think about that the key takeaway for our listeners is that this is not a theoretical threat. This is not a hype. It's not something that people are cooking. It really demands an AI native approach. But before we kind of bring this to a close and I recommend them to kind of visit your website, I would love you to kind of shed some light into what's your plans with CrowdStrike. You just recently announced your partnership with CrowdStrike and it's exciting. So any words that you could share on your CrowdStrike partnership?
Absolutely. So we've announced a strategic partnership with CrowdStrike to really focus on developing capabilities that are AI native for SOCs, or making what we like to refer to as a SOC-less, infrastructure, where a lot of the technology that we've developed through LLMs and whatnot are being applied towards the automation and immediacy required for defending these types of infrastructures. And CoreWeave and CrowdStrike are partnering on that, which we just announced a few weeks ago. But it also allows us to take a well-known, established security vendor and partner with them to ensure that as part of that shared security model, that our clients, our customers' environments have the best and most capable tools to defend themselves as they run on top of our already secured environment. So I'm really excited. We worked with George and team on that, and we're both, moving forward as fast as possible to be able to deploy this to our customers, coming to a theater near you.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like your trio partnership between NVIDIA with CrowdStrike and yourself, you're kind of taking it from the ground up and everything kind of, is baked into the whole end-to-end journey. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, the vision is that we have a complete stack for our customers so they need not worry in a piecemeal way about security.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jim, for shedding light on this crucial topic. I'm pretty sure that our audience is going to love it. And I would encourage the listeners to visit CoreWeave's website and definitely read through your recently published blog on this topic. I was super thrilled to have you. Any closing words, any closing comments, Jim?
No, I really appreciate you having me, and being able to get the message out is an honor for not only for CoreWeave, but to get to discuss this very, very real issue that we're all facing.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into AI Cloud Essentials. Join us next time as I'm joined by Corey Sanders, SVP Strategy at CoreWeave. We'll be busting the fear and myth of migration in our episode, which is aptly titled, The Migration Myth, Switching to an AI Native Cloud is Easier Than You Think. In the meantime, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and Twitter for ongoing sites. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.